Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves. Um, if you're a regular, you know these introductions and reminders by heart. If not, listen up. So you can like the Leather Elves on Facebook. That way you get notifications when we go live. You can catch surprise sales, pop up events. You can also follow us on Instagram or subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are in the process of planning the 2026 Rockstar Tour, and so Rockstar Rescue Tour, and we've got the route. We know pretty much the directions we'll be headed. If you've got a rescue that you think would be great on the tour, please let us know. Just send me a message or an email, whatever you're comfortable with. And we do already have several rescues on board, so that's kind of exciting. Yeah, I see Carrie's on. Carrie's my partner in crime with or partner in travel, let's put it that way, on the Rockstar Tour. So tonight, my guest is someone that you may or may not know. I've known her in the industry for quite a while. That just means we're seasoned. We're not old. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Bono. Hi, Lisa. How's it going?
Hi, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
It's, I was thinking about, going back the years and I was like, oh no, 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 it's not old. It's definitely seasoned professionals. I think we're going to go with that.
Yes, I like that.
Okay, good. I'm going to read your bio. It's pretty impressive, so it may take a little bit of time. Lisa is a certified parrot behavior consultant with the IAABC. She founded the Platinum Parrot in 2008, and ever since has been presented with opportunities that enabled her to grow, learn, and teach. Lisa hosts a webinar series for Lefebvre's called The Gray Way. She has authored articles for Bird Talk. Right there, we're dating ourselves. So we've written articles for Bird Talk, Birds USA, and Bird Channel. Lisa has embraced decades during the including the LLP course, Living and Learning with Parrots, Living and Learning with Animals, Behavior and Medical Conferences. Her greatest joy is her flock of grays, who you can see right there with her. She hosts a webinar series for Lefebvre's called The Gray Way and has launched a second series called Parrots Past and Present. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you've got to introduce us to the flock there. Who have we got?
Okay, so over my left shoulder, let's see. All right, yeah, it's a little difficult here. This one's Emma. We have Sam in the middle, and we have Sterling. Sydney is actually in their little sleep room because he likes to scream the entire time I'm sitting here with the computer. So, and then I have a Kayik as well. That's my husband's little friend, and he's in there keeping Sydney. Yeah, there we go, keeping Sydney company. So they're usually pretty good. Sterling might fly and land on my head. It's live, so things happen, but this is my little family.
This is, and if they weren't moving around, people would be writing to me telling me, "Oh, well, those weren't real birds she had," And so yeah, it's birds. We get it. So all right, I when Lisa and I were talking about what we were going to talk about, we kind of decided we just wanted to free flow a little bit about what we've seen over the years and how things have changed. But so how did you get started with birds? I had asked you about in the industry, but what about just with birds?
Well, actually, I had animals. My mother actually bought a dog like a month or so after I was born. So I've always been around animals. And unfortunately, I started having issues and found out I had allergies. So we had to rehome my cat. It was an Angora white cat named Eric, and we had to find him a home. We were able to keep a couple of our dogs because they were poodles, and I didn't react as much to them. But I was very lonely, and I really love that cat. Um, we also, my parents divorced at a young age, so we moved around a lot. And every time I got used to the kids in school, we ended up moving again. So my mother figured she really had to find me a companion to do something. And we went to a pet store, and I always loved Tweety, the cartoon. And I picked the one yellow parakeet that was in the cage. And that bird was a great companion. I didn't know at the time that we were the same age. I was 8 and Tweety was 8. She was turned back in after the original owner passed away. And it was funny being such a young kid thinking I was such this bird trainer because Tweety knew how to get up and she would sit on my shoulder and we had such a great time. And, come to find out when we went back down to the pet store, they told me, she was 8 and Tweety actually stayed with me all through school. I had a couple of the parakeets as well, and she lived to be 18. So a nice age. And through the years, I just started, getting more birds, more moves with the family, more birds, more companionship. They taught me unconditional love. I blame it on my mom. She never got grandkids from me, but she got lots of birds.
There you go. It's so, I think everybody starts their stories. Almost everybody that I talk to, it's I had a parakeet, and I remember, I mean, when we're talking about how things have evolved, I remember my nan had a parakeet named Sleepy, and Sleepy lived in a round cage in the corner of the dining room. And at the time, everyone smoked, and everyone would light up after dinner. And there was, Sleepy in the cage, and he was great, and he lived a good long life. But how far we've come from the round cage, smoking around the dining
Yes.
room table with a parrot in the room. Um,
Well, I can
so
tell you that growing up in the 80s with all my birds in my bedroom, because that's where they were, with the Aquanet and everything else, not knowing anything, I mean, somehow they survived. And,
mhm,
now we know better. And now there's like, you're not, when you come here, if you stay here, you're not allowed to spray anything in the house. It's like I'm going through your luggage, doing the whole thing. But, it's, you learn as you move forward.
yeah. And Carrie just commented she had her first bird is a parakeet, and they're the bomb. But she also pointed out that we were all in that dining room, with the parakeet and children. Everybody was smoking, So it's we have
Right.
evolved, thankfully. Um, but so why the African grays, Lisa? How do we go from the yellow parakeet to African grays?
Well, I had my parakeets and cockatiels, my canaries. Then I moved on to conures. People would just, find out I had a bird somehow. And then I had a bird club and more birds were coming in. I was probably about 15 or 16 years old. And my boyfriend and I had gone down to Florida to spend time with his family down there. And we went to meet this long lost aunt. And we go to the house and we're knocking on the door and we hear, "Come on in." And, we're playing with the door handle and, we can't get in. And we knock again and they say, "Come on in." And this kept going on. And finally I said to my boyfriend, I said, "Why is your aunt such a jerk?" But that's not the word I used. And he
Mm,
says, "I don't know. She doesn't know we're coming, but, I don't know why she's acting like this." So we started to turn around and walk away. And then all of a sudden, this lady appears at the door and she's in a towel with her head wrapped up. And we're like, "Why were you telling us to come in?" And she goes, "That was my bird. And I'm like, "What kind of bird do you have?" And she's like, "An African gray." So I'm like, "Wow, that's really cool." So, like most people, I got interested because of the talking. Okay,
mhm.
because I never heard a bird talk before. My first bird I was bitten by was actually a minor bird because I was young and sticking my fingers in the cage, just what you're not supposed to do. And I know they're supposed to talk. And then, I met the gray, and it was probably not till I was about maybe 24 or 25 before I was given the opportunity to have my first African gray. I couldn't afford to buy one. The
Mhm.
rescues weren't around as much. I could tell you that when I would go to the shows and stuff, I would pretty much stalk Maggie Wright because she was always doing her lectures on grays. So I learned a lot on her from her at different events, and I never knew Irene, and I never knew how really smart these birds were. Um, I when a gray finally came into my club, there was like we had a list of what people would want to adopt if it came through the club, and one little African gray came through, and I was number 19 on the list because I always put myself last. And, so everybody else, I sent out the information exactly like the lady told me, that he bit and, you needed to wear a leather glove and all this kind of stuff. And people went and saw him, and the bird was in a really bad situation. And everybody's like, no, I'm not taking it because it did nothing but growl when you looked at it. And they're like, no, we're not taking it. And I was like, I'm not leaving it. So took him home. He was pretty bad. I had to buy him a cage on the way home. He went to my dad's house because I was afraid of him having some sort of disease, to give to my littler birds. And finally, after we, had enough money to take him to the vet and have him tested, and he was fine. We brought him home, and he was just so terrified. He screamed at everything, and it was right around the time where they were having a lot of fires in California, and a lot of breeders were losing their birds because of these fires. I don't remember if it was, 90, 91, 92-ish. And I sat down one night and I had a little talk with this bird, and I said, I'm really sorry. I've always wanted you my entire life, but I know you're not happy. So we're going to try to figure out how to get you back out to somebody in California. Because again, I didn't know anybody on the East Coast,
Mhm.
and we'll get you out there. And, the next time I went into the room where he didn't growl, and I thought he was dead because it was the first time in weeks he didn't growl. And I looked at him and he was fine. I went over and sat by him. He was fine. And you know what? He never growled the day after that. I don't know what it was. And it sounds really strange, but he never growled after that. And he was such a great companion.
Hmm.
And that was my first one. So I don't really know how old he was. He was wild caught import. And he was a great bird. So since then, having all different kinds of birds. I've had Amazons, the Kayik, you know, the littler guys, the conures, pretty much everything, except for macaw or an eclectus. I haven't had those. But I kind of meshed with the grays. I don't know why, but I just did. I think because, they may tend to watch and not be in the middle of everything, and that's how I've always been. So, I really do enjoy them.
I think, it's interesting when you meet different people and you find out what types of birds they've had, um, what kind of what the personality is. It does, it explains a lot. And, I think with the grays, I met Jeannie Pattison, and I remember being in awe, right? These grays, she had such a way with the grays, and she had the grays night songs she had recorded, and I remember just thinking, wow, and she invited me to her house, and I went, and she said to me, we were talking about something. She goes, well, that's what friends do. Jeannie Pattison is my friend? I was blown away, and just because
Right.
watching her with the Grays was fascinating, and they're different. I mean, you can't say they're all the same, you can't, but they are definitely, they're not your average parrot, in my opinion. But I had so the way I got into birds was my parents had a company and they were making dog leashes. And they went to a pet. They were this dog leash that you'd have with you all the time. It would curl up into itself way before the retractable ones. And they went to a pet store, and the owner said to them, "Well, you should use the extra leather to make bird toys." And they did some, research, and they found out no, they couldn't use that leather because they needed vegetable tanned leather. But they started making bird toys. My mother made the most beautiful bird toys, but they were ridiculously labor intensive. Like, it took 2 hours to make this toy, and we were like, okay, that's not going to work. So they started doing it, and I took it over when my mother passed away just to keep my dad busy, and then it became all consuming. It took over my life. I got a Kaik, and he was everything a Kaik should be. Yeah, Carrie has some of Jean's grays. And it's just you learn so much, and it's through that observation and that relationship. And so that's aside from the parakeet, I didn't have birds in between, but I was able to reconnect and have learned so much just from people in the industry and really just observing and studying. And I think, with the grays, that's what they do too. They kind of observe and they just kind of check it out, and then they, interject when it's appropriate. They're like good um, they're good party guests, like they watch and then they interject. So so
Yes.
you went from getting your gray, and you mentioned your club. So tell us about how that worked.
Well, when I first growing up, when everybody else was subscribing to like Tiger Beat and all those magazines for the kids, I thought bird talk. So I was just a little bit different, and I grew up reading everybody's articles, and I would know when the shows were coming. And the big show I would look forward to every year was the Long Island Parrot Society.
Mhm.
So it just always happened to fall on my birthday weekend, which was great. And I would go out there and to see the camaraderie, to learn, to meet people, to see what they were able to do with that big show, and knowing that they were doing it on a littler scale each month. There was nowhere in northern New Jersey to go and meet anybody. So I was like this, strange person that had birds and didn't know where to go with that. So I just decided, I had talked to a friend of mine who is a little bit more mature, and she gave me some ideas how to do it. And what I did is I put a little article or a little note or ad in Bird Talk.
Mhm.
I put flyers up everywhere and just kind of hope for the best. And we rented a place. I think it was a firehouse we were at first. It might have been a church. And I was actually shocked that people were starting to come. And they were coming from New York and Pennsylvania. And I've met lifelong friends from that. The club was around for quite a while, as it went the ways of most clubs because of the internet. But, we were also part of some regulations that New Jersey was trying to do. And so we became involved. We did Bird Clubs of New Jersey. So there was 5 clubs that all met together once, I think maybe I don't think it was once a month. It was probably every couple months we would meet together and decide how we're going to meet these legislative changes that they're trying to do. So we were part of a bigger organization, which was great. And it was nice to know. And I talked about this on my Lefebvre webinar today. When we had the clubs, getting out there, meeting the people, having their phone number, knowing where they live. If you needed something, people were there. They were there in an instant to help you out. You don't find that, or you don't have that on such a big community, on on the internet. So a good example was today, as I was trying to get some pictures off of Facebook. I saw a lost bird, a lost African gray. It's in the next town over from me. They posted it 2 days ago. Had I known, I would have been right there to help her. Through the club, it would have been instantaneously. You would have had people all over the place to help. So
Mm-hmm.
it, we miss. I miss being in a club and part of it. Now I've been in South Carolina since 2018. I think I've met 3 people, 4 people that have birds.
Yeah.
So it's much different. I encourage anybody who has not been to a club that's still there, go out, go to a show, meet your
Mhm.
people. It's
Well,
important.
you know, I was at Long Island Expo last weekend, and
Saw
Frank just
that.
said we had Parrot Expo, and it was they are family. I was from Boston originally. Now we're in Maine. I can go to that club, and I did a talk for them Wednesday night before the expo, and it's family. I mean, I know, okay, if I need help with something, they're there. And, and I said that to them. They need to be really proud of what they've accomplished and the fact that they're still going strong. They've moved their meetings to Zoom, but
Okay.
so Frank is listening. I'm going to convince Frank that they need to go back to in-person meetings. Um, but
Hi, Frank.
it's the yeah, Carrie says she misses the clubs, and Candy says it's like that in Massachusetts too. There aren't clubs. There's a club in New Hampshire, um, but it is that camaraderie, that sharing of knowledge. We can go and speak, but there's somebody in the club that maybe had the same experience that somebody else, is going through now. And, knowing that there's somebody right there. Being in Maine, everybody told me, well, Jeannie told me I shouldn't move here because she told me African grays were illegal in Maine, which they are not. But she's like, what are you moving to Maine for? You can't have an African gray. But one end of my street, and it's not a big street, we live in a little town. One end of my street, there's a cockatiel, and the other end of the street, there's a gray and a cockatoo. So
Okay.
I know that people are here. It's just a matter of meeting those people, getting to know those people. And yeah, Frank says he would love in-person meetings again. And I think, I used to think that it was a phase we were going through. We all thought it was COVID, and after COVID, we'd all regroup and we'd get together. I don't think we're going that way. So
Sad.
yeah, it really is. And, you were at AFA and I was at AFA, and honestly, Lisa, we probably wouldn't have reconnected if it wasn't for that, because we were face to face at a conference. And I
Right.
encourage people to get, I mean, and even that's changed. At one time, AFA had thousands of members. They don't anymore because people think they can just, hop online and get the information. Um, but I think it's important to make those connections if you can. And I'm trying to start a bird club in Maine, but I'm not so sure. I just, um, but so the bird club, let's talk about the platinum parrot. How did that happen?
Um, I really didn't have too much thought about that. When we were in North Jersey, my husband was in the military, um, and we got transferred down to South Jersey. Didn't know anybody. Well, we went from North Jersey to Central Jersey, and then we were there for 2 years, and it got transferred again. So it's a good thing that I'm used to moving. We got down to Long Beach Island area, and my husband was getting ready to deploy. I didn't know anybody, and I was joking with a friend online, and she says, "Well, why don't you start a bird store?" I'm like, "Huh, okay. That sounds like maybe I could do it." Now, I was a manicurist by trade. Then I went into being a secretary, and I was a really bad secretary. But my friend couldn't. My friend's husband couldn't fire me because she was like my best friend. So I was bad, but he let me stay. And then when we moved again, I was, like I said, I was doing nothing. So I joked with my husband. I said, "Hey, why don't we open a bird store?" And he said, "Okay." I was like, "Crap," because I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm the type of person that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, even if it's a detriment to me. Okay. So I went and formed the LLC. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know I should really go to a lawyer or anything. I did it online. So I did the LLC. Then I had to get the website. Then I had to find a place to put the store. And we took actually a home equity line of credit on our house. So regardless if that store made it or not, I had payments. So I opened in, let's see, I think it was the end of August, probably the beginning of September. In a cute little storefront. And my husband deployed to Iraq in January. So I was able to devote a lot of time because honestly, at that point, I didn't want to be home. Okay. Yes, I had my responsibilities. I had my birds at home, but home was a reminder that my husband was not there and may not be coming home. So I spent a lot of time at the store. I met a lot of great people. The store was probably just a little bit different than most stores because I didn't really consider it my store. It was a community store. And because it was just me, if I was, say, on the phone and a customer came to the register, another customer would bring them up. So it was like everybody was doing everything for me. People were putting cages together, putting toys on the wall. It was fantastic. And several people actually had keys to the store. So if they had to get to the store to pick up food after work, they would just leave me the money on the counter and take the food. So it was just a little different. And we were there for almost 10 years and very proud of what I did. It was a success. And honestly, I would be more than happy to still be up there doing that. But my husband retired from the military after a couple deployments, of me being at the store, clients becoming more like family, and me going to their houses on holidays when my husband was deployed. And he said, "Well, I'm done, and I'm done in New Jersey. I am done paying these taxes. I'm going south." So I was not convinced. He promised if we went that he would build me a bird room. So here we go. And I decided to go down there, and I still have the store. I would say it's online more than anything, but I don't really have an active site because I don't have the knowledge to maintain it myself. Okay, with ever changing products, with everything I carry, and or I know it's expensive if you have somebody else do it. So what most people do is they will either text me, email me, call me, Facebook me, and I'm maintaining the majority of my clients up in New Jersey. And all the people I have with all the boxes, the toy boxes that I put out. So it's still keeping me very busy, which is good. I do miss the people coming in and giving me hugs, chatting about everything under the sun. I do miss that aspect. So that's why when LaFever asked me if I would go to the AFA, I was thrilled to be among my people out there, chatting, dressing up again with all my bird stuff. Here I walk out, in a gray costume. They're going to think I'm insane. So do it there, and everybody's like, "Yay, that's cute."
Absolutely. And that's the thing too. I mean, it's that understanding that comes with being a bird person with, it doesn't matter if you're a breeder, rescue, an industry person, it doesn't matter. You're a bird person at the end of the day. And I think that's, what makes that in person so important. I just do have to warn you. I don't know if you saw Frank's comment. He said one time he saw George in uniform and he almost fell over. So I think Frank may have a little man crush on George. Just be aware, okay?
I
Frank's a
I
lot
know
of
that
fun.
Frank and my husband get along quite well, so I've seen them interacting. So
There we go.
yeah,
Yeah, I think he did tell me that. I told him you were going to be on, and he told me that when we were at the expo. So, um, but so over the years, and you also do Gray Parrot Consulting too.
yes,
So tell
yes.
people about that, please.
Okay, so another thing besides the store, what I would do is again, I would be following everything and learning everything I possibly could. And I was friends with some of the um, behaviorists that came before me, the ones that we would go to the show. You got your Liz Wilson, your Chris Davis, Maggie Wright. I was friends with everybody, and Jamie. I know Jamie's going to be on there. Cashmere with you, and Cashmere, and I would follow them. I'd read them in Bird Talk. I'd kind of stalk them. I've had Liz at a couple of the events that I hosted with my with my club, and I heard them talk about the IAVC. So I decided to go in and see what it was about. And I went in as, I think it was an associate. It was so long ago. It was probably right after I started the store. And I went in just to follow and see what they're doing and, maybe learn from these people that are my mentors a little bit closer. So, and then they urged me to go on and, hone in on my craft. So I've had some of the great people in behavior, Jean being one of them as well, because I'd follow her and try to learn all I could from her about grays. And again, Maggie Wright, because she specialized in it. And so I decided that now why behavior, and because you do it as well, the science works for all species, okay? Kids, lions, everything. And then you have it tailored to, like you mentioned, the grays are a little bit different, and then your Amazons are different, and your Caiques are certainly different. So you kind of learn a little bit more. And I specialize in grays only because I've been around them for so long that I feel comfortable where if I'm looking at one, like I could see my friend's bird and I know which bird it is and who it belongs to. If they post it on Facebook, it's just like, I know who it is. That was the picture that's up right there. That's my Otis. That was my wild caught Timna that I got my first one. So I decided to specialize in the grays because I just know them like the back of my hand. I can also, definitely confident working with cockatiels and Amazons and stuff like that. But usually if I have somebody come in and they're looking for, say, somebody that wants to work with a cockatoo or a macaw, I've lived with cockatoos short term because I found out they are dustier than 5 grays. So I couldn't stay with them very long, but they ended up coming in through the club and then going to other people. I kind of helped rehab them and get them into different homes. But if I have somebody come in looking for something that I personally have not lived with, I am going to refer them to one of my colleagues that I know has that same feeling I do about grays, because it's about the client getting the best they can get for help. So,
And you mentioned the science, and my background isn't with animals; it's with people. It's with clinical behavior with people, and it is the same science. And I realized that pretty early. And realized that this was my passion, that working with animals, whether it was feathered or fur or, scales, whatever it was, I could apply the same science. And I think but like you said, it's knowing the nuances of the different species, knowing the nuances of the individual bird. I do,
Right.
I do online consulting, and I had a young lady who I happen to be friends with, but she called and she asked me if I would do a behavior consult. And I thought, she's very skilled. She knows what she's doing. And I said, sure. I said, who are we talking about? And she said, a hawkhead. And I went,
Okay.
oh, okay. So that's a whole different ballgame. I said to her, yeah, we can do that. I said, but I'm not making any guarantees. Um, you know, I remember, I'm sure you knew Georgia Fletcher, and Georgia had a hawkhead named Joseph. And I was
Mhm.
going to Georgia's one time, and she was out of town, but she said, "Here, here's the code. Let yourself in. All you have to do is feed and water the birds." Oh, easy breezy, right? I go in. She's got a blue and gold that was notorious, and he fine food, water. Talk to him for a little bit, not a problem. I turned to Joseph, and the crest came up, and I went to reach for the door, and I knew that was just not going to happen. And I couldn't let Joseph, dehydrate or starve. So I managed to get the food bowl out because I think he understood that was what I was doing. So, but the water, there he is. Yeah, the water was another issue altogether. I ended up pouring water from the top of the cage down into the water bowl, because
Mhm.
Joseph was a classic. And but it's knowing the species you're dealing with, and knowing what you can't you're not going to train or work with a conure the same way you are with a cockatoo. It's just not going to
Right.
happen. And when a cockatoo, somebody calls about a cockatoo, um, Janice Lang said, oh my god, Joseph is a piece of work. He's notorious. But when a cockatoo comes up, I had someone who was rehoming a 78-year-old wild caught cockatoo. And
Okay.
I said, okay, all right. I called Shelly at Cockatoo Ranch because I
Okay.
knew that Shelly would allow that bird to live out his life, as he should. And that's another thing that comes from the in-person meetings. Knowing these
Right.
people, knowing the person to call about a 78-year-old wild caught cockatoo, knowing
Right.
who's the right tool for the job. And I think that that's something that is lacking in today's bird world. Um,
Yes.
you
Because it
know,
tends to be a lot about me, no matter who it is, about me. It's
yeah,
not about, it should be us. We're a community. We should be working together for the betterment of the birds and ourselves.
yeah.
So usually when I get a cockatoo, I'm like, Jamie, can you help me out here? So, but yeah, it's again, it's all part of the community, meeting people. Yeah,
So, biggest change that you've seen for the positive in the bird world?
it's probably going to be the same for the negative, and that's going to be the internet.
Yeah.
So you can reach out and reach out to more people. I have more access to my veterinarians that are around the country.
Mhm.
Um, but then again, that's also taking away from the in person.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really do wish that Bird Talk was still around. That was a great asset. I can't tell you how many magazines I have up in my attic. I could probably
Yeah.
start, the biggest bonfire you've ever seen in your life. But I might have to need to refer back to that at one point. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, so I do miss that. I miss the club meetings. Um, that's the
Yeah,
biggest change.
and you do refer back. That's the thing, because even though we've evolved as far as our knowledge is concerned, and we know that the round cage is not the best choice. We know that you know what we're providing for enrichment has to be more than the 2x4. And I think so. We're getting that information from online, but we're also there are things that still work. There
Right.
are things that we recommended 20 years ago that are still applicable. And I have the
Right.
same pile of Bird Talk that you have. And when you when we used to write for Bird Talk, we'd get multiple copies, so we have all those too, right? Um,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And what I
but
would do is I actually had a library at the store. So when people
nice.
came in and say, somebody just bought a parakeet for their little kid, I'd be like, "Ooh, I know the issues you need," and I would bring it, and give it to
Yeah,
them. Bring it back next time you're in. So I did that a lot because it's always nice to have something in print right in front of you. And I can't tell you how many times I referred back to that while I was writing my articles and then did research on top of it. Um, so it was a great asset. And then of course, you're sitting there and you're reading and you read something by Jean, and then all of a sudden you want to meet her. And I can tell you, I think I met her at the AFA many years ago, and I recognized her obviously, and I was intimidated to go up and meet her.
yeah.
Um, I haven't been intimidated to meet anybody, but for some reason I was, and I went up and I saw her and I went to introduce myself, and she already knew who I was, and it was like we were friends. So she was such a sweet lady, and I miss her.
Yeah.
So
And it is that meeting someone that you've looked up to, meeting someone that you've learned from over the years, and suddenly they're in person, and it's the coolest feeling. And
right,
the other thing is when I go through periods, and I don't know if you do too, where I go, okay, is what I'm doing still relevant? Is this still, am I providing new information to people? And then someone comes up at a conference or at a club meeting and says, "Oh, I've been following your stuff and I learned so much." And it's just, okay, it is making a difference. And I think
right,
that's something, that everybody who's out there, and, I remember you mentioned, Chris Davis and the crew that did behavior back in the day. And I remember speaking at AAV, and I was on a panel, and it was Chris Davis, I think, Barb Heidenreich, um, and it was that group of behaviorists. And I remember going to my first a what was it? It wasn't ASA, it was IAS conference.
okay,
And Julie Murad was there, Irene Pepperberg was there, um, and Sally Blanchard was there. Sally told me I had to, if I wanted to advertise in her magazine, I had to send her toys. And Spiky the Kaik had to try them out first. Um,
okay.
but, and people say, oh, well, the stuff that they taught is old school. It is, but they honestly, some of it is still applicable. And if it wasn't for them, you and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to talk about what we talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember one of the events I had Liz Wilson in for, and she told us pretty much just bring the orneriest bird you can find and bring it to this show. So we're like, all
Mhm.
right, we got our blue front Amazon. We're going to challenge her. And, she was set up like on a little stage because it was like uh, hotel we went to. So the stage was up there. She was on there. We bring out this blue front Amazon. The owner's like, we haven't been able to touch this bird in years. Liz was like, really? She's like, okay. She went over the bird, and within a second, she had that bird on her hand. And I think everybody in the audience was just stunned. And here I am thinking, how did she do that? And, she taught us. And I mean, I had to use it with my Amazon several times, and it wasn't anything that was adversive. It was just distracting the bird while the bird's getting up. That's all it was. And it was so simple, but so relevant to today, because
Mhm.
I know if I'm watching my guys and they're honed in on something, I'm gonna distract them. I'm gonna go like this, and they're gonna look there, and then they're gonna be up. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of relevant stuff, and things are ever changing. We are learning new things every day, whether it's behavior, nutrition, or veterinary medicine. And that's why I love going to conferences, and I love veterinary conferences to sit in and try to learn as much as I can. All right, so I might go in here and write out here, but I will eventually someday have to repeat what they said
Mhm.
to help somebody else.
Well, I mean, and
So,
it's things that we get used to saying too. I think so. When we were on the Rockstar tour, we went to a couple of places that had birds that had tested positive for Bornavirus. And I said, and so has some Borna positive birds in one of the interviews. And Mark Roth, who owns Bird Fever in Indianapolis, reached out to me and he said, I love what you did. It was great. But can I just make one comment? And I'm like, oh, absolutely. That's how I learn. And he
yeah,
said, you said they were Borna positive. He goes, have you talked to Dr. Dalhousen about that? And he said,
yeah,
it's not just Borna positive. It's AGN. It's all it's different things. And so Dr. Dalhousen is going to be on the live stream because we're talking about it's more information.
right.
Douglas mentioned here in the comments that there's a lot of bad information on the web, and there absolutely is. And I think what we can do, and what I suggest you do as well, Douglas, is if you find a source that is really not a good resource, just don't direct people in that way. If I find someone that, is, and if it's really contradictory to what, is generally, held as good information, I will tell people, you might want to avoid that. I mean, how do you handle that, Lisa, with the
It's difficult. You do have to watch what you say. Yeah, I always try to be the middle of the road and maybe explain different reasons why maybe they might think it's a good idea, but it's probably not. Again, I am more here for the birds than wanting to, care if I upset a human. So there is a tremendous amount of bad information on the internet, and that was actually another part of my webinar today. Because we go on there and we could really spend our entire day, 7 days a week, on the computer trying to correct information that's out there, and we get drained. At least I know I do. And
Mhm.
you have a hard time taking care of everybody else if you don't take care of yourself. So there are some times I have to step away because
Mhm.
it's just, I'll lay in bed all night just thinking about this one situation that I cannot change. And, you have to, I like to surround myself with a bunch of people that I know if I can't handle it, they can. And I have no problem saying, please talk to this person or please talk to them because they're the right person to guide you.
Yeah.
Um, and it is extremely difficult with all the information that's out there. And it is, I saw the comment where it's very hard for new people to, decide what's new or what's right and what might not be right. Um,
Mhm.
so if you're on the internet, I would suggest try to find not so much a chat, but maybe a group with your specific bird species. Okay. You don't have
Mhm.
to be active in it if you don't want to, but a lot of times they have files. You can look through it, and then you can decide if you want to research on it a little bit more and see, if that's the correct thing to do. Because the last thing you want to do is get bad information. Like the one bird that's lost by us right now, everybody's like, oh, you got to look high, you got to look high. Well, they don't know if the bird's clipped because the bird has not, that question was not raised. So I've helped with several birds getting them back home, and several
Mhm.
of them, sadly, that we've found have passed away. They were hiding under things like decks. So, I told them in the comment, everybody's like, look high, look high. I'm like, also look low. They
Mhm.
like to hide. So,
And I think that's a great example of how you need to, and getting more than one opinion. So if you read something and it feels off, or you see something online, I always encourage people to go find another source. And like, so
correct.
Frank just asked, does anyone know if mahogany wood is safe for birds to chew on? And he can't find a list that says yes or no.
Okay.
So I have all, and the safe wood list is the bane of my existence, because one list says, oak. Well, if people know, more than half of the turned pieces that you get on toys that are made are oak. It's the acorn that you need to worry about. Do you know about
Correct. The
mahogany? Because
porch. Say again.
so mahogany. So I use the pods and I use the outer casing of the pods. But I don't. I've never used mahogany itself, Frank. So I don't know. Lisa, do you?
No, I use the pods myself, so I don't know
Mhm.
about the actual wood.
And if you've got mahogany wood, Frank, you need to make wonderful furniture out of it instead. Um, but um, so I always tell people on the list what's safe, what's not. Get, two, three, four lists. If it's on all of them, then that's the answer you're going to go with. If it's on one, but the other three say it's okay. And again, my word of wisdom to everyone has always been, if you're not comfortable with it, just don't use it. Your bird hasn't died to this point because he hasn't had, and I'm not saying this to you, Frank, but because he hasn't had mahogany. So, it may be something that's great and new, but if you're not comfortable with it, just don't do it.
Right, because
Um,
that's how we find out it's not good why people's birds die.
yeah. Um, so, Nick said that you did an excellent job, by the way, with your talk at AFA, in the
Oh,
comments. Nick
thank you.
made that. So, and the review of the conference afterwards too. So we haven't covered half of what we decided we were going to talk about, but I think that's okay, because that means I can have you back again if you are willing to do that. Um, it's there are a lot of comments on here about ego. Karen brought up ego being an issue, and I think the egos have to go away, because
Mhm.
and most of us in who have worked doing this for a long time don't mind working with other professionals.
Correct.
It's you know and Karen, I agree with you, and I think the ego comes into play when people aren't comfortable with themselves and working with others. So hopefully
Correct.
we can do away with a little of that. um, the Oh, so Deb says something people need to remember is they're getting, if they're getting their own wood, that it's coming from where it's coming from, then it's not sprayed. Yeah, Frank is pretty. I know Frank, and Frank's pretty good about that. So lots of things to talk about still. Janice enjoyed your talk at AFA. Um, and
Yeah.
I think, we were hoping to talk about the evolution. Oh, there you go. That's a good point, Nick. If there's not a local club, there's AFA, ASA, National Parrot Foundation, and Flight Club Foundation. So there's a lot of bigger organizations that you can, attend and get to meet people. And you're meeting a bigger cross section, which is kind of cool too. So,
Yes.
Um, but Lisa, anything, I mean, is there anything you want to really hit on before we end this? And if you're willing to come back, I would love to have you on. So, um,
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. The only thing I could really and I want to hit home is to make sure that if you have these opportunities to learn, regardless if it's a webinar or a club, learn all you can. Okay, because the information that we may have been given yesterday might have changed by this morning for the better. And Dr. Bob, I mean, he's fantastic with his lectures and avian coronavirus, the AG, and all that kind of stuff. I've sit in on all of his as well. So it's just important. Get the knowledge, even if you don't need it yourself. You can always share it to help someone else. Okay, we should be in it together. That's how we're
I
all going to thrive.
I do need to just Carrie's asked a couple times about the pet care vault. The pet care vault is for she gets a lot of phone calls from people, you know, my mother passed away and we don't know how to take care of this bird. We don't know what to do with it. So we created the Pet Care Vault, and it's a subscription that yeah, she said tonight she had to pick up a 35-plus-year-old Amazon. The owner passed 3 nights ago, no plans. What it is it's a subscription, a membership. You go in, you designate a caregiver. The caregiver has to sign off because I know, Lisa, you've seen this where, oh, yeah, so and so will take my bird, and so doesn't want your bird. So you designate a caregiver. The caregiver then signs off. Yes, I am willing to be that person. The person uploads dietary information, routine, vet records, a picture if they want. They can put as much or as little as they want. Then a QR code gets generated and it gets sent. If something happens to you, you scan the QR code and all the information gets sent to the caregiver. It also works for pet sitters. So it's available at petcarevault.com. If you have, Carrie said she said 3 this week. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, and there'll be more on our Facebook page as well. So, um, thank you again, Lisa, and thank you for what I really appreciate about you is that you are always learning and always evolving. So, thank you.
I try my best, and I appreciate everybody who's has taught me through the years, because I know I haven't been the easiest person to deal with at times, but I always had the bird's best interest at heart.
Yeah, and that's the bottom line. That's how it is. You know, people ask Carrie and I if we choose the rescues on the Rockstar Tour. Do we choose them, you know, because they're really good or because they're big or they're small? And it's not, that's not what it is. It's for the birds. And we'll go to big ones, we'll go to small ones, we'll go to some that might need a little bit of help. Um, it's not going to be out there on front page news that they need a little bit of help, but we'll do what we can. And because none of those birds choose to be where they are. So
Right.
thank you again,
And
Lisa. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's how the majority of my birds have come to me, because people have passed, and my oldest guy is 44. It's Sterling. He's over here. I grew up with him. I have Sammy, who's in the middle. She's 32. One of my friends passed away and left me in her will. So what you're doing with the vault is a very good idea. It's much needed.
Thank you. All right. The ASA, I know, Nick, you were going to put that up for us. ASA is coming up. It is in Shreveport, Louisiana, the 29th of October to November 1st. That's this coming week. You can also, if you can't make it, scan that QR code. It's asabirds.tv. I know that Nick and his wonderful team at, and I can't come up with it right now. Exotic Animal Foundation. I got it. Look at that. So Nick is going to be working on that, producing that. So if you can't make it, scan the QR code, but you really should make it for all the reasons we talked about tonight. We will not be having a live stream next week. I'm going to be out scaring little children for Halloween. That's my goal. No, it's not. We get like 300 to 400 kids here. It's amazing. Um, and we have rescheduled Jamie. Jamie's going to be on. We were going to do it, and then we had some technical issues. Nick had some technical issues of his own, and so we rescheduled for November 7th, and we're going to be talking about redefining what a forever home is. There's some questions about what that really means. So Jamie and I are going to talk about that on the 7th. So have a wonderful Halloween, Lisa. You
You
got
too.
your spooky
Thank you.
gray birds, and we will have you back in the near future. So thank you, and everybody have a great week.